Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
No, man, you know that we connected a couple of months ago. I listened to exactly what worthy.com does, and I think it's a great outlet for some pawnbrokers. And before we get into that, let's explain exactly who you are and what Worthy does.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Brian Bordainick. I'm the head of business development at Worthy. And what Worthy it was started as a consumer to business platform for people to come and sell their inventory. A lot of what we do is from bequeathed estates, so death and divorce, where consumers from all over the country are sitting on inventory and not sure necessarily what to do with it. So we take in that inventory, we don't take an inventory position, and we host a 2-day auction where we sell back to the trade. So a really great way for people in the trade to get their hands on inventory, and also for consumers to create a competitive bidding process for their stones.
Awesome. So recently you guys have taken a dive into the pawn industry. Kind of explain, Brian, why that is and what benefit Worthy has for the pawnbrokers.
Yeah, so I would have a couple months ago, maybe a year ago, called myself a pawn noob, but I feel like I'm learning a tremendous amount from our relationships in the pawn industry. And one of the reasons why we started to get into the pawn industry is just because we felt as though we were working with people and we didn't even know it, which is kind of crazy. And secondly, I think we really were able to satisfy a need that a lot of people within the industry had. So, we were meeting pawnbrokers who wound up in a liquidity crunch, which happens in the industry, especially for some of the non-large chain stores. And we're sitting on, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory in stones and loose stones and settings that they weren't able to necessarily move through the consumer side of their business. So that didn't necessarily line up for us. So when we sort of peeled back a layer and we said, hey, if you're sitting on this inventory, unfortunately, the way that the diamond industry is heading as a whole, some of those things aren't coming back. So what we're able to do for a lot of those in the pawn industry is take a lot of that inventory that's been sitting in a safe and be able to create a liquidity event for them and relatively quickly. So from the time that someone enters in information on our system, and then what will happen next is we print out a prepaid shipping label for them. We bring it in. If the stone isn't certified by the GIA or another certification house, we'll actually send the product right back out the door to have it certified. And the reason why we do that is because a lot of people, everyone who's bidding on our stones on our site are bidding sight unseen, except for what the information that we're presenting to them. So it's just the certification number, high resolution video and photography that we actually take. So once all of that's done, the pawnbroker then can set their minimum and say, hey, look, I got into this for $20,000. I'm really looking to get out of it. Worst case scenario for $19,000, whatever it may be. And then we host a 2-day auction where we market it out to almost 1,000 buyers across the world. And one of two things happens. One is the auction closes at the end of the 2-day period, and it's over the $19,000 in this example, in which case we send the stones out the door and we wire the money directly to the pawnbroker. Or the second, let's say they set the reserve at $19,000 and it hits $18,000. Well, then we'll give them a call and say, what do you want to do? You can sell it for that price, or we'll pay to have it shipped back to you. So that's been a really successful that we've been able to work with people in the pawn industry. And it's been a really fun and interesting sort of growing side of the business for us.
So, I mean, I'm remembering my days, at the shop with my brother, getting into a cash crunch, needing money to pay payroll, obviously going and melting gold and getting the stones and either waiting for a show or calling the diamond guy that we know by the time he kind of comes around and we kind of cut a deal and we get some money on that. So what you're basically saying is that the pawnbrokers can send you the stones. You'll certify them GIA if necessary, if it's a 1 carat above or whatnot. Then you put them up on auction for 2 days, and you've got a network of 800 to 1,000 buyers. They'll bid, and if the pawnbroker likes the bid, then they accept. You wire the money, and it's golden.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And look, this is something that everyone listening to this podcast knows a lot better than I do. But I've gotten to learn this a lot over the last little stretch, which is those liquidity crunches are real. Those cash crunches
100%.
happen, and they're tough. But it's also very rare that a pawnbroker winds up in a liquidity crunch like that and isn't sitting on a fair amount of inventory. And that's another way that actually we've been working with people in the pawn industry. So when you take yourself out of the what we're going to call, and I'm using air quotes here, major markets like New York, San Diego, LA, et cetera, and someone comes into a pawn store, and this happened to us the other week. Someone comes into the store with $100,000 piece, chain, stone, whatever it may be. Well, that there's a deal to be had. You probably feel good making a loan against it or taking an inventory position. But at the end of the day, now you're stuck with a $100,000 piece that you probably can't move in said market.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge way that we've worked with a lot of people in the industry where they're like, great, we got into this for a deal, but now we actually have to move. We have to move this piece, and instead of that happening in a smaller market where they're gonna be able to move it, but they're not gonna be able to move it at the price they want, we're able to expose it to people all over the world, and I think that's been another really good way for us to work with people within the industry.
Right. I also want to mention, I mean, we're talking big numbers here, $20,000, $100,000. There's a lot of pawnbrokers who are listening to this who might make a deal on a $6,000 stone where they paid $2,000 for it. And in their market, they can't sell that item, or it doesn't move as fast. And so you gave the example of a $20,000 stone, get for 19, but there's also the possibility of if you paid 2, it's worth 6, you might get 5 for it, and that will happen quickly because you've got 1,000 buyers looking at a stone as opposed to like one dealer going around. So instead of them offering you 3 for it or 3.5, because they've got to make a margin, you've got somebody offering you more money for it. Is that correct?
That is correct. And there's 2 things that you brought up there that I think are worth talking about. So one, I always talk about the big stuff because that's what I get like really excited about. But our bread and butter is really in that like 1,500 to 2,500 range. And the only thing is, that we always tell people to keep in mind is that we're selling back to the trade. So where we really need to have like a minimum value of $1,000 back to the trade, but that like our sweet spot, like where we live all day long, is in that $1,500, $2,500 range, and we move a lot of product there. So that's just something they kind of put out there. The second thing that I think is really interesting is that a lot of the pawn industry is based on relationships, and those relationships over the years are great when you wind up in some of these cash crunches and things like that. But a lot of what we've learned that happens at the sort of the local level is you have someone who stops by the store, and they stop by once a month, once a quarter, and they're going to pick up all of your 1 carat to 3 carats, your 2 carat to 4 carat, your princess, whatever it may be. They're going to stop by and they're going to pick those up. But unfortunately, this is where the friendship can kind of come back to haunt you a bit here, which is that people are like, hey man, do me a solid here, give it to me for a little bit less. And when you have a 15, 20-year relationship with that person, it's human nature. We're all inclined to sort of help our friends out. What we've been able to do, and what we've sort of seen from pawn leaders across the country, is sort of a desire to put a little bit of distance between themselves and that individual or group of individuals so that they can actually fetch the best price. So it's, at the end of the day, look, changing systems is hard. Diamonds, they're an interesting commodity because no one's like, oh my God, thank you, Worthy, for coming along. I've been sitting on a shoebox of diamonds and I can't sell them, right? Like you're always going to be able to move the stones. What we're saying is, explore a different system, explore a different opportunity, because we're going to get you a few more points than you've gotten historically. And I think that's been the real sort of value add that we've brought to the table, is both ease and increase in value.
And I think the best part about it was that the first time we spoke is that if you don't like the price, you get the stone delivered back to you. So there's no real loss there. Obviously, you guys take a small percentage, just like if a pawnbroker was selling on eBay or if they were selling on another platform like Gunbroker or whatnot. So I want to make sure that that's out there in the open and clear. But also a question that somebody might have is, hey, doesn't Worthy kind of compete with me in some way, selling where you guys are consumer to business? But the truth is, when I think about it, there's market for everybody. right? Like your customer is going to come in and you're going to buy that stone, you're going to pawn that stone. And this is just a way to think outside of the box to be able to sell those stones and make more points on it, have more people look at it, because you might have somebody interested in Miami for that 1.5 carat stone. And in San Diego, there's not that big of a want for it. Something like that might happen. And so you might get a couple more points on it, making it $500 more, $1,000 more, as opposed to just being in your local market. Is that how it works?
That's a really great way to think about it, for sure. And I think at the end of the day, like look, you're always going to the best thing you could do as a pawnbroker is sell to a consumer, right? Have someone come into your shop and pick it up for full retail, right? We're not competitive in the full retail sense, right? Like we tell this to our consumers that come to us, which is that, you know, if you have a private buyer for the stone, like they're going to fetch a better price than we will. And I want to just be like honest about that. So what we're doing is, if you are going to sell back to the trade in any way, shape, or form, we're going to create a very competitive, very short, and very targeted bidding process for that. And yeah, we take a success fee, but we call it a success fee because like the only time that we actually get paid is when the pawnbroker actually sells their stone. So it's really funny. You know, this is like one of my favorite parts about dealing with people in the pawn industry. They're always like, come on, get me a better, you know, come on, like you can pay a little bit more. I'm like, we're not taking an inventory position, but it's just so funny because it's like so ingrained. It's like, we are, it's been a really great way for us to align with consumers and with those in the trade to say, look, we're in this sort of together. We're going to market the stone the best that we can because, you know, the only time that we get paid is when you get paid.
That's awesome. So you guys aren't taking a position on the stone. You're just brokering it out to the best bidder. And the fact that there's 1,000 bidders, you might get a higher price. Now, just so that people know, you know, how many stones are being shipped to Worthy a month? How much business are you guys doing at the moment? I mean, you guys aren't just like a small startup operation now.
No, it's unfortunately I'm in my apartment right now. Otherwise, you'd see behind me a team of gemologists and salespeople and operations people and safes and security cameras everywhere. The company is still a privately held company, so we don't share overall sales figures. What I will tell you this is one of the coolest things about the company is being there early in the morning when the FedEx people come, and there are cart upon cart upon cart of stones being brought in from all over the country. I mean, we're hosting hundreds upon hundreds of auctions a month. So it's a pretty amazing thing because the market has been so fragmented for so long, and pawn included in that. You know, and it's been really awesome to sort of make it a little bit more of an efficient process, both for the buyers and for the sellers. You know, I think, you know, at the end of the day, what we're seeing is that for the people who are on the buy side of our platform, that, you know, they're able to acquire the goods that they need without having to run around the country or sort of these like amalgamated kind of processes that they put together over the years to make sure that they're satiating their demand. You can kind of do it in your underwear at your computer, which is you know, and that's worth something to people, which is why we usually see a higher price than people see in the market.
Now, if the pawnbroker goes to worthy.com, do they get to see the auction, or is that kind of like a different platform that's mailed out to the trade? How does that work?
Yeah, good question. So when a pawnbroker or someone listening to this podcast is like, hey, that sounds really interesting, I'd like to give it a shot, they'll go to worthy.com, they'll sign up as a store, and then they'll get routed to me or to one of our customer service people to help them kind of walk through the account. Now, once they go through the process of submitting information on their stone or group of stones, what will then happen is they'll be in our system and they'll start to receive notifications via text or email at every sort of step of the process. Their goods have been delivered to us, their goods have been sent out for certification, the goods have come back from certification, and then they're actually able to watch their auction in real time and see what's happening. So they can kind of see where it's at. They'll get a notification when it concludes. You know, for a lot of our friends in the pawn industry, that they're on the consumer side, you're selling an engagement ring. It's a one-off process. For a lot of people in the pawn industry, they're sending us, you know, 10, 20, 30 pieces of goods. You know, it's a lot to sort of manage, but they'll get notifications when things are ending and starting at sort of whatever frequency they want, to be able to kind of track it and see what's going on. So look, at the end of the day, I think the value add is like, if you have something that's sitting in your safe, shoe, wherever it may be, it's worth going through the process one time, with a couple of different pieces to see the process unfold. And we do specialize in stones, but we also have a really strong and growing business in gemstones and in watches and estate pieces.
And it's not just stuff sitting in shoe boxes. We talk about inventory turn here all the time on the podcast. There's a lot of people who will put out a 2-carat stone and try to sell it in their showcase, and it sits for a year and 2 and 3, and at some point you start losing money, because if you don't turn that money and put it back into pawn, you're essentially losing money. I mean, me and my brother, we did the statistics. I think it was like, if we don't sell hard goods, which are like electronics and stuff, within 3 months, we lose money. If we don't sell gold within 6 months, we lose money. If we don't sell diamonds within 9 months, we start losing money. And that's at a 4% rate. I mean, if you're in a state that's doing 20%, you're losing money much quicker. So for me, the biggest thing is to find ways to be resourceful. And that's why I brought you guys on the podcast, because for me, it's how do I, as a pawnbroker, become resourceful and find ways to move my merchandise so I can take that cash, put it back into the pawn balance, and make recurring revenue over and over again. So that's why I brought you guys on. I think that's imperative for people to give you guys a shot, to check it out and see how it works. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, that's their thing. But for me as a pawnbroker, I know that I always wanted to find a way to move my stuff. I mean, we would go to the swap meet and sell. We would do tent sales for our general merchandise. We would hold wine and cheese nights for our top buyers, because we wanted to move merchandise. And that's what the name of the game is. Move merchandise so you can grow your pawn balance. And I know that if they go to worthy.com, sign up, it's just a different mechanism, different way of having these stones being shown to your network of over 750 dealers.
That's exactly right. Get them out of your hands. Because I'd make the argument that any inventory, like the more efficient and the quicker that you can get on turning your stones, just putting the cash back in. And I think that's one of the big things about the industry, is that we're all sort of waiting for someone to come along and buy it at retail, right? And I totally understand that. But it's I bet when people really look and they analyze their inventory, there's been some stuff that's been sitting there for a really long time. And that's it. A lot of it is, these things go in style and out of style really quickly, and they decrease. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think that being able to get rid of these things and get rid of them quickly at a great value is the name of the game.
Yeah. And the biggest mistake pawnbrokers make is being emotionally connected to a piece. Like when you get emotionally connected to that 3-carat ring because you got such a good deal on it, you want to sell it retail, and it sits there for a year or 2. I mean, we just had David Geller on, who talked about the importance of turning your merchandise and talked about the importance of moving that jewelry and how and when it starts losing value if you don't start selling it. So pawnbrokers, pawn leaders, go to worthy.com, reach out to Brian. How can they connect with you if they want to?
They can reach out. Well, mine's a little bit complicated, my email, but they can just email our general info at or help at. And once they sign up as a store on worthy.com, they'll be connected to me directly.
Awesome. So once you go sign up on worthy.com, that's www.worthy.com, and you sign up as a store, Brian will shoot a message to you. He'll get connected with you. Guys, if you have not checked out Worthy, go to worthy.com. Brian, thank you so much for being on the show and actually building a different platform so that pawnbrokers can be resourceful to move their merchandise. I say this all the time: move your merchandise. Stop sitting on it. Stop holding it. Move it. Find different ways. And worthy.com is one of those options. So thanks for being on, brother.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. And once again, check out the Facebook page. Go to facebook.com, and you can go to the Pawn Leaders Podcast community. If you have any questions for Brian, I'll put the email on the show notes, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Pawn Leaders Podcast.